sexual health. Why does it have to be so taboo? I'm not just talking about taking in the proper dietary constituents and avoiding other things that affect the endocrine system. I'm talking about how ubiquitous it is to go into any gym to see someone doing arm curls, or how standard it is. You wouldn't be surprised if you saw someone work out for 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes 5 days a week. You'd say, good job, you're in good shape. But the taboo aspects of somebody being able to admittedly utilize something that's such a valuable tool, and this company invariably went out of business because there's no way to market quality products like this without marketing it in such a sense where people buy it as a fetish. And your sexual health shouldn't be a fetish. And I'm talking about VacuTech. I don't even think you could find, they just disappeared. And it was a California Bay Area company that was one of the first in what was called PE, or penis enlargement. And I know this area, it seems like it's just off topic, but it's like, this is your body. This entire body is your body. Your butt is something that, your buttocks, your glutes are something that's so foundational and fundamental to core movements, core exercises, standing properly, the pillar that that it to work it, and particularly when you work out that particular muscle too much and you're displaying it just like you do with your biceps, it becomes cliche and taboo. And then people start to realize that, and they utilize that and try to take advantage of it, or are criticized on that level. And it's just a body, it's your physiology, it's the entire physiology. And this area was always very interesting to me. And then more so on a metaphysical level, how we feel about ourselves and our own bodies, the location of these particular areas that could be called erogenous zones, but they're not. You only have to be, they're only erogenous zones when you're erogenous. What if you're never erogenous? What if you're so in choosing asexual that any sexual responses merely show you your overall health and your conditioning? What then? How can you be utilized by other people? It really gets into the exploitation that beauty itself and the aesthetics, speaking from an aesthetic standpoint, and that is the area of interest where I left off years ago, is where once you reach this place where you are considered to be, you look like a mannequin, you look like a male model, and you're not trying to be any of those things, but society from an existential sense is trying to force you into becoming useful toward the disposable application of sexual gratification, and no one's ever gratified. That's the whole thing about that. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. It cancels itself out. So when I would pose, I would get more attention based on that area than any other area, and it baffled me, because people haven't reached a maturity level where someone who approaches training the entirety of the person, not just from psychological aspects, the endocrine system, but to go into this omnipotent state of consciousness and being and becoming, and to say, it's okay for me to work on myself. And as a product in display, I can't survive until I show, like an Olympic athlete. Why does a superior athlete who could be training this way on their own and probably get better results, where there wasn't funding available at this time for this brief period of time, there wasn't available resources for this small window, right, of time to be able to go about just supporting being your best. So on this channel, I've tried to get away from that, talking about that, but it's the area of interest, and it always will be, in terms of aesthetics, but more the psychological ramifications of what happens to us even when we are just going into this, observing this on our own, how our sexual health. So the VacuTech system was something that allowed, it was a vacuum pump, and there was manual versions of this, and there were electric versions where it would keep a consistent and constant amount of pressure. They also sold devices for breasts, and I think the main issue was that they worked in what was called PE, or penis enlargement, breast enlargement. These areas are only enlarged as much as your bicep is going through a pump process with nitric oxides, to where it's just a conditional effect, right? So it is not, those were not penis enlargement or penis enhancement tools. They brought blood flow to a viable area that has muscle tissue, right? And that requires maintenance, and that would overall be able to provide a healthy systemic blood flow to an area that otherwise doesn't have that. So I would train that area for 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes and go through a priming process where the skin must also be considered, right? When you get into those 9 layers of the human body and you're just looking at it from a physiological standpoint, when you look at a cadaver, hopefully there's no necromancy thoughts going on there. That's really sick, but that's another area of how our culture and how human beings have always had this sort of illness, and that should be the last thing on one's mind. When you're on your own spiritual journey, the energy that you can culminate, if you just look at it as chakras, you're cutting off that. And I don't believe so much in this, but being very interested in esoteric concepts, and it's unavoidable, like the Kundalini and the metaphysical aspect of Metatron's cube and so forth, right? And you get into these areas that could be you could look at like Deepak Chopra or one of these sort of gurus that lays out this sort of a metacognition aspect to how to assess and assert through these energy systems, these energy pathways, and to create a balance. So we are heavily imbalanced, and the only time that people get the blood flow to that area, they use it more in a childish sort of way, which is sick in itself, where there has to be this concrete spasm, i.e. orgasm, it's really like an infantile process or approach to a very mature thing of accepting the self, balancing the self, being a healthy self through and through. And the problem is that when other people are not healthy and not up to par, right, there's a lust, there's a utilization. That fat king that's so hedonistically and gluttonously eating nonstop, and can have and do whatever they want, and they are completely unworthy, right? And then the superior man or woman who is in balance will invariably be enslaved by that person for their own amusement, and this gets into breeding and a long biohistory of abuse, and what we're kind of left with now in reference to humanity are these bio bodysuits having past traumas throughout generations. So it ends up having to be this secret organization within the self to be able to say, no, my sexual health is just as important as any of these other muscles, these areas of my body. And I not only have to show self-efficacy in how I use it and what happens when I use it, but the fact that I am not going to allow the PSYOP program to sexualize the process, right? So I found cheap, knockoff, more novelty-based equipment when it came to a pump. You can't choose the sizes, you can't choose any of that, and I haven't done this for years because of that. I got away from that. Spiritual growth, but then there's something missing, so fundamental to the truth. There's no guessing game. There's no, at 54 years old, I'm extremely found, extremely supported in my the rudimentary aspects of who I am to the point where I know when I'm under spiritual attack. So there's an entire demonology to this, where there's a scary and pervading aspect to a consciousness that is extremely aware of us, that is very jealous of us, and it is extremely base in its intention. And it's almost like the easiest aspersion, the easiest solution is to think this is a disincarnate entity that craves being the flesh, craves going back into the flesh, and wants and becomes fixated and then fixed on the most viable, healthy person, you know. And this is in the assumption that we are completely transparent to entities that we're very much unaware of and that are around us all the time. And so when we reach to the stars, when we reach to becoming our best, there's always something there. And it's saying, no, you have to go through our maze. You have to go through what I call the Masonic jungle. And it's like, no, I don't. And I didn't ask to be born here. I didn't ask to live here. But as long as I am alive, I'm going to be the best self that I possibly can. And a big part of that is my own sexual health. And at 54 years old, you should be angry when you're in your mid-50s and advancing in age, where you're looking at it going, I'm actually skipping a fundamental aspect of myself because of the immaturity of people not understanding that this is just like, and I'm not talking, so let's get clear of what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about showing a nude body, a male body penis pumping or a female body breast pumping, and then that becomes something sexual. How is it that it's not sexual and you should be ashamed of yourself and feel strange with yourself if you feel sexual when you see a woman breastfeeding? Do you understand the entire physiology of what's going on there? It's really disgusting. And it's not a moral objection. And then some say, oh, you should feel sexual all the time. You should feel comfortable with yourself. You should, you know, I've known some really strange people that supposedly did, you know, this is the area of liberty that I talk about, where somebody can be so comfortable with themselves that they can be this intellectual animal and celebrate this sort of Aleister Crowley view or concept of, oh, bestiality is perfectly normal. And it's like, oh my God, like you've liberated yourself from principles. And it's like, no. The scary thing is they follow a set of principles that are working antithetically to pure principles. So can you be pure and exercise the entire form? This is the form we've been given. Form follows function, function into form, without allowing a deviation to occur. You know, once you have a healthy phallus that's as healthy as the rest of your body, now what? Now you're going to be used by other people? No, because it's not an existential truth that you're seeking. But to measure your arms, to measure your chest, there become constants and norms, the Vitruvian man, where, and that's what really baffled me about bodybuilding, is you see these guys getting up on stage, they're flexing their whole body, and it's like, then if they were doing that with their phalluses out and they were working on those, and this sounds like you're laughing, you think it's, you know, it's immature, and it's like, no, it's a completely rational, and it's beyond rational, because I'm talking from a pure standpoint. And so that's where society becomes corrupt. It's like, oh, you should live in your shame, you know, shame on you. And it's kind of like, but why? Animals are naked all the time. They're not ashamed. You know? And we're teaching animals shame. And then once they understand that shame, they're wearing that Masonic apron. They're wearing the compass and the square right over that area. They're being measured as men, as women, the Eastern Stars. They're being measured by their brotherhood and their sisterhood and an alliance. And it's like, no, I am not an existential animal. I am balanced. I am both internal and from the intrinsic sense, I am developed. I'm going to allow myself to be developed. That's my blood flow. That's my endocrine system. That's my neurohormones. That's the nutrients that are traveling through my blood system. This is equally as important as any other muscle on my body. It is equally important to focus in on the health. So do I want to see bodybuilders on a stage with their phalluses out working on that type of thing? No, not necessarily. In fact, completely not. Yeah, so we're all conditioned in a way. But for them to work on that area, instead of looking at an aesthetic, and then, you know, once they get off the cycles, once they get off the steroids, which a lot of them never do, they just go on to like a modified TRT program for the rest of their lives. They live with something where they have this hatred and self-moralization that occurs, where they just they basically come to this Faustian deal, right? And it's like, you shouldn't have to come to a Faustian deal. You shouldn't have to just digress to the physical aspects of, oh, this is how I get rich. I gotta win, you know, Mr. Olympia. And then you look at these Olympia competitors when they can't do that juice anymore. And most of them are still on something. You know, most of them they go back to it if they get off of it. You know, but it's a really bad message. It's a false message. It's not one of prosperity and a fountain of youth and a wellspring of eternal life. It's being disposable, treating yourself and allowing yourself to be treated and discarded as if you were an item that was going through the process of planned obsolescence and can just be thrown away and cast away, you know. And it's like, that's you know, being a sellout isn't the message of today. The message of today is to be your best self and to not get pervo and strange while you're going through the process, and to be able to work on every aspect, integral aspect of yourself, to become integer and to be full and complete. And that's a challenge to the entire system, to just stand up and be that personification of man and God, God and man, and to not you shouldn't have to not allow that to pervert you. That shouldn't be pervasive in society as it is.